Welcome to Leadership Coaching. Each week, we explore fresh topics inspired by our coaching clients
and our guests to discover the essence of effective leadership. Welcome to the Leadership Coaching Podcast with Bill Turney, IFS practitioner and coach, and me, Martin Kettlehut, an executive coach in the leadership vein. So, Bill and I were noticing right before we pressed record here, the ongoing need of human beings to get complete. And this is a topic that we've hit on before, and we have another earlier episode dedicated to it. But because it is an evergreen topic and a moment-to-moment need, we thought we'd revisit it today and go into it in more depth.
Yeah, no doubt. And as I listened to you introduce the topic, I put on my listeners' ears, and for those that are around coaching a lot, or around landmark education or ontological coaching, this word completion is not a word that means much more than I got the job done.
Right.
So we might need to expand on what are some examples of completion and the need for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just finished listing off several different ways to think about it. So completion could mean or involve letting go of something.
Mm-hmm.
It could mean forgiveness, which is a letting go of a resentment, let's say, or harboring a hurt that and nursing it rather than releasing it. Forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that there's been a rupture in a relationship that has created a breakdown in communication and cooperation, and repairing that rupture might be part of completion. So there's a lot of things that happen in a normal life lived that would benefit if there were conscious, intentional completion happening, so that life can continue to flow again.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to a young executive last week about he was saying how when he gets home after work each day, he just needs to scroll for a long time to come down from the day. Like, it might not be the most effective way, but what he's trying to do there is get complete, right? And so I said, well, I drew it out of him, like, what went on in the day that you're trying to come down from, and then we talked about the pressure that he's under, and the intention he has to do a good job, and things that people have said about what he needs to get better at and everything. And so by the time he listed those things, and then we talked about how he was doing at them, he became complete. He said, "Wow, there's a peace that's come over me now that I don't get when I just scroll until I can finally relax." And I said, that's what completion is. That's what it is, So, and it just reminds me that this is part of why it's such a universal and evergreen topic, because as we go through our day, we're collecting things. We're collecting, like, oh, she said that and that bothered me, or I didn't say this and I wish I had, and just one thing after another. And those are all incompletions. And so to look at each one of them and say, okay, here's why this stuck to me. And here's what I see I need to do to put closure on that, or to get that off of me, then you can actually create completion around it. So this is why is this important is another, I think, something to mention. It's because, all of that gets built up, and the more we've got this stuff that hasn't been completed, the harder life gets, because you're dragging all of that with you, and and all of a sudden, boom, it gets let out in the oddest, most undesirable ways. And so, you want to be really free, to be liberated in the deepest sense, is not to have any of that hanging on, to be complete, like really to be totally present and not have IQ cycles going through these things that didn't get complete in the day. That's true liberation, and that's why it's important.
Did you say IQ cycles?
Yes.
What? I've never heard that before. What's an IQ cycle?
Well, a loop that the brain is going through. Oh, yeah, I still feel bad about that. Or, oh, yeah, she still owes me. Or, oh, I felt uneasy about that meeting and I can't figure out why, right? All of those things are what I call IQ cycles.
Yes. This may or may not be a good example, but I thought it was, I don't know, half a dozen different examples just from the past week for me of that sense that I had that something was incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
There was something that I was going to do, for example. Did I do it? There's something, this gnawing at me, at my consciousness, that's saying, you forgot. What'd you forget? What'd you forget?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the examples is I just took a trip over to the west side of the state and spent some days, as you know, with my son, Billy. And I had taken my laptop with me in a laptop case, along with my iPad and some other things. And after I dropped Billy off on Whidbey Island, I was driving to the ferry to get onto the mainland and drive back to Spokane, about a 5-hour drive once I got onto the mainland. And we'd already been on the road for 2 hours from this Airbnb that we stayed at for about 4 days to work on creative and writing projects. So now I'm on the phone with my wife, and in the course of our conversation, I said something about taking some notes on my computer, my laptop. And then a thought popped up. Where's the laptop?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was like a flashing siren alarm in my brain. And I couldn't be with what my wife was saying to me. I couldn't listen to anything more that she was saying.
Great example.
And engage in the conversation. I had to pull off at the first. I did. I pulled off at the very first chance I got, so that I could safely park, get out of the driver's seat of the truck, look in the back seat, and felt the relief. There it is. There's my computer. It's in the computer bag. Mm-hmm. And then I didn't have to hang up with my wife. I just said, hold on, I got to pull over to make sure I got my computer. Mm-hmm. And then that alarm, it was done. I was fully back to present with my wife again, mm-hmm. on the phone as I continued to drive towards the ferry terminal.
That's a great example. Yes.
I think that's a boots on the ground, everyday example of an incompletion. There are certainly other examples that we should take a look at, but let's look at just that one. And I also, while you were talking about your client who scrolls to complete, I want to break that down a little bit more too.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Good. So maybe we start with my example and then we go back to that. How's that sound?
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So in that case, what was incomplete was whether whether or not you had the computer with you, right? Well,
exactly.
There was a moment in the past where you did put it in the car, but you weren't present to doing so.
In fact, once the thought popped up, where's my computer? Mm-hmm. A process engaged in my brain. We could say a part of me took over trying to remember whether I had the computer or not, mm-hmm. and determining whether I did, in fact, need to pull over and see if it was there. Mm-hmm. And that part had me rewind 3 hours to the moment that we left the Airbnb and loaded up the truck and drove off the Olympic Peninsula onto that ferry. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't remember the moment that I put the bag I remembered seeing it in the foyer of the house, but I couldn't remember putting it in the truck. So while that's going on, my wife's still wanting to have a conversation with me, and I'm still wanting to, and I have, and so one of the very first things I did was declared my incompletion. I didn't say, "Hey, wife of mine, I'm declaring an incompletion here," or a breakdown. What I said was, "Hey, I'm distracted right now because I don't know if I grabbed my computer or not, and I just need to check and see if it's here. So you don't need to hang up. I'm just going to look in the back seat." And then I looked in the back seat, and that was done. So,
and why was it? See, this is an important question to ask. Like, why couldn't you let go of that to be with her? I assume it's because you knew you were going to need the computer.
definitely, the computer is valuable because I need it. Number one, in my work, but number two, there's valuable information on the computer, and I didn't want it to get into somebody else's hands. I part of that cycle that was happening. This EQ cycle, is that what you call it? That was happening in my brain. What did you say?
IQ.
Oh, IQ cycle that was going on in my brain was, if I left it at the Airbnb, is it out on the driveway? Is it on the porch? Is it in the house? Can I contact the owners? Do I have to drive back and get it? I better turn around right now. What's this going to do to my next day of travel plans? So it needed to be resolved. And until I got it resolved, could I have let go of it and continued the conversation with him? I don't know if I would have been able to.
No, otherwise you would have, but you couldn't. And so, but it's the import. I think that's part of what I want to bring out here, is that the import is why we get, that's when we attend to that importance. Now, in this case, all it took was looking in the trunk.
Yes.
To see, is it there, right? But if it hadn't been there, then it would have taken, calling somebody to check the driveway or driving all the way back or something like that.
Right.
But it's that well, that's what we always want to look at, is like, why is this? Then, if it's, well, because I'm going to need that computer and it's got important information on it, all of that, right?
Right.
And so, that I think is always one of the key questions, and like with my client, let me just say, check in with you. Are you complete with the discussion of your incompletion there?
There's one other memory that's popping in that parallels this one. I guess my storytelling part wants to tell about this one too. It's very, very similar. My wife and I honeymooned in Kauai, in Hawaii, and we put ourselves on too tight a schedule to return to the airport when it was time to fly back. We had to return a rental car to a location that was further from the airport than we thought. We get there, it's happening, but I've got this very rushed energy about it. I got to get this back. We got to get on the shuttle. We got to get to the terminal. We got to get checked in. We got to get on the plane so we can get back to Spokane when we thought we would. And now we're waiting for the shuttle. And I reached for my phone to look at the schedule for the airlines, and I can't find. It's not in my pocket. I look in all my luggage, and then I realize, oh, I wonder if I left it in the car. The car's already been turned in, so I go back into the rental car office that we're standing in front of, and say, hey, I need to go check the car and see if my phone's in there. Do you mind if I go back and look at it? Sorry, sir. The car's no longer yours. You have no longer access to it.
Oh, my.
Are you kidding me? My phone is in there. Would you have somebody else? No, we don't have any extra help. Okay. So what are you suggesting that I do? And the guy said, I don't have any suggestions for you whatsoever. This is not my problem. This is yours. And very, very rude. I won't name the rental car agency, but this is, so now not only was I concerned about losing my phone, I'm really upset at what I'm judging as very, very, very bad and rude customer service. So I go back out and I start venting to my wife, and the shuttle's going to pull up in any minute. So I said, screw it. So I went out behind the building, found the car, It was still unlocked, hooked in, found my phone, and came back out front. And now I was complete with getting my phone back, but I wasn't complete, as you can tell, with the rental car agency and the service that I received.
With
Two
that
different levels
guy,
of things.
I mean, the agency might be okay, but that guy was really bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and I haven't thought about that again until we had this conversation just now. But that's another example of an incompletion, and somewhere probably in my psyche,
Right.
it and it just leaked out a little bit here. Was my You could hear it in the excitement in my voice as I told that story.
Really?
That I'm very dissatisfied with how I was treated there, and
Really?
yeah, there was a lot at stake.
And so, yeah, what was at stake? That's the question, right? That's that import. That's that. Why is this stuck to me question?
Like my computer, I needed the phone. A lot of very valuable information on there.
Right.
Would have
But with the guy, that's a different piece. That's the more interesting.
Well, there I needed attunement.
You needed
Attunement. I needed someone to get me to be interested in my dilemma and to recognize that they were actually in a position to help, rather than throwing up
and not
very
having attunement left you feeling
angry for sure, misunderstood, and not valued,
right. Right. So you weren't valuable to him. You
and
he,
and scared. I was scared too.
right. You were not important to him. You were not valuable to him. You were scared, and so what got? How were you able to get to a place that you could forget about it all these years since then?
Well, since I had my phone, I could start scrolling. uh, how was I able to just let it go? Did I let it go? Did I just forget about it? I think this is akin to the scrolling with your client.
I
That
see. Okay.
that I allowed the busyness of life just to take center stage on the consciousness of my mind.
So there's an opportunity here today to look at what do you need. What is that
What
part
do I?
that was scared and devalued? What does it need to really put closure on that event back then? I mean, is it as simple, and it might not be, as saying, well, I know that I'm valuable.
It may be just that. I'm certainly not feeling anything near what I was feeling that day.
Right.
As far as being upset and feeling discounted and all those feelings. Does the part of me need anything now? No, I think it wanted to tell the story.
Right. Well, I think it probably wanted to tell the story in part to get it complete. Right.
Maybe so. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe some validation, which I have already gotten from you, and as you say, it certainly doesn't hurt, especially since I know it's true that I do have value. Just because one individual who is, I'm going to assume, was having a bad day or was overwhelmed by the situation, treated me in that particular manner, doesn't reflect reality. It just reflects his mood.
That's right. Very good. I mean, I think this is the sort of thing that it takes. So I'm just going to generalize a little bit and say, sometimes when somebody's rude to us, all there is to do is to say, wow, he must be having a bad day, because it's not about me at all. He's having a bad day, because that's not normal. And, maybe, he needs something. Maybe there's something like in the moment, they would have been like, wow, how could I comfort this guy? Dude, you're having a really bad day. What can I do to ease your load, for heaven's sake, right?
Right. I'm laughing because I imagine myself giving him a hug. You want a hug, man?
Right. Something like that. Right. I mean, so many times in the course of a normal day, people don't have the presence, because they've got a bunch of incompletions, to be totally with us. And so we have to recognize that. Sometimes it just takes going, wow, I know this wasn't about me. I'm whole and I'm complete. I'm going to go back behind the building and get my phone. But geez, poor guy. That's a gesture of completion right there.
That's right. Yeah. And it comes from compassion, which is absolutely required, but it's not something that can be efforted. Interestingly, I've noticed I recognize that if I can come from compassion, as you're describing, I might have been able to in that moment, then everything else that needs to happen will follow. From compassion comes curiosity and comes clarity and maybe courage. As it was, the parts of me reacted to that entire thing. My rebellious teenager part is the one that went back and got the phone. Screw you! You're not going to tell me what I can and can't do, and was very proud. I was very proud of myself under the influence of my rebellious teenage part that I got my phone despite being told I couldn't go back there and get it.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know these people, and they don't know us, and so I don't know why, but in my feed, I've gotten a couple of a series of these stories where somebody is mean to a police officer or a judge or something like that in the grocery store or in the doctor's office or something, and then later on they get arrested or brought before the very person that they had been nasty to, and it's like, wow, I didn't know who I was insulting. We don't know the history. We don't know what's going on with other people, and they don't know what's going on with us. And so, and they're carrying as many incompletions as we are. So it helps sometimes to just recognize, oh, that wasn't really. I'm making it mean that that I'm not valuable, or that yes, I'm scared, but I'm making it mean all these other things.
Right.
And it doesn't mean any of that. It doesn't mean what it means is that guy's having a really hard time.
Well, and even more basic than that, it means that guy said those things to me in that tone of voice, and it left me to figure it out on my own.
Right. Here I am to figure that out on my own.
Everything else is meaning making.
I mean, I noticed that it used to really bother me. There's a certain move that people do in traffic. I think it's called cutting somebody off. But it happened to me several times, and I would always be like, whoa, who do you think you are? What's going on with you? And then I was just like passing somebody and moving in front of them in their lane, and they honked at me, and I thought, oh, that's what I've been complaining about in other people, and I just did it to somebody else, and I didn't recognize this is how traffic works. It didn't mean anything that other people did that to me. We hope you're enjoying this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the show. You'll find show notes and a transcript at leadershipcoachingpodcast.com. Now back to the episode. Or like trying to show me that they're better, or trying to steal my place in the line, or insult me, or any of those things that I took it to mean. It's just the way it happens. I do it too, right? And since then, I have a lot, I don't get hooked by that.
These shifts in how we're viewing these situations that we may be attached meaning making to in the past. Those are referred to in the IFS model as updates. Our parts get an update. In NLP, I think it's referred to as reframing. But our parts do whatever they do. They influence us in the way that they influence us because, given the information that they have, it's the best they can do to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish for us. And what they do and how they influence us makes sense to them. An update is when we give them new information that makes even more sense than the information that they already have, or updates the information that they have, so that now how the influences changes, which is a lot different than my approach to trying to change Bill Tierney for the first, how long has it been now? Let's just say the first 60 years of my life. Much of what I would do would be to recognize, here's this thing about Bill Tierney that I don't like. And so I'm going to change that. So I would attempt to make myself be different.
Right.
I'm not going to do that thing anymore. But now that I understand that I have multiplicity, I have multiple internal subpersonalities that are like operating independently. What I recognize is that if I want to make a change, I need to get curious about the part of me that has me doing it the way that I want to change. And then negotiate with that part if and when it finally trusts me to negotiate enough to negotiate with me.
It happened to me at the grocery store a day or two ago. I was looking for an item, when like you have to weigh certain items at the automatic teller. And I was having trouble finding the item I was looking for. And though the person, there's always somebody watching to make sure there's flow at these machines. And that person just came by and touched the button and did it. And I at first I was like, what do you think? I'm stupid? I couldn't figure it out. And then I saw her going around and being very helpful to everybody else. And I was like, oh, she's just being helpful. She took care of it for me. And so instead of being insulted, I was grateful. I updated that part.
Yeah, big shift. Interestingly, you didn't notice that she was helping everybody else and wonder if maybe she thought everybody was stupid. You went to, she was actually being helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Great.
Right. So, and I could have been incomplete with that. I have been in the past, in fact, too anxious, trying to take control of my life, doesn't understand who do they think I am? Like I've walked out of stores feeling that way, right?
Grumbling. Yeah. Yes. So our listeners,
I do want to go back to the joke about scrolling, because there's something important to say about why that isn't effective.
Yeah.
Right. We've said it, but I think we should clarify,
let's be explicit about
why
it.
does sitting in front of the TV all evening not get you complete with the day?
It doesn't. What it is it's a distraction. It's a way to disconnect and not have to be present to what the brain's doing. So I'm going to go back to using parts language again. So when a part of mine is like obsessing on an idea and just gnawing on it like a dog on a bone and just chewing it up over and over and over, and the result of that is that I'm suffering. I want to use different parts of me to distract myself away from that part that's creating the suffering. And scrolling is a great way to do that. Anything that gets my attention off of the thing that I'm suffering over is a great way to do that. But the thing that I was suffering over still hasn't been completed.
Right. Similarly, you might notice that, if you're incomplete with something, and I'm not saying you, Bill, I'm saying we, the humanity, that we're nasty to other people. And it just, that energy of the upset or the incompletion is there, and it's trying to find a way to get expressed or to get out. And it's not effective. It's still, why? Because we're just creating more incompletions, as we know. And so, like you said, what needs to happen is to go back and attend to that original, what started this. So it's not like, oh, because she insulted me, I'm just going to be mean to somebody else. That'll settle it. No, it doesn't. It just creates more incompletions for you. Now you've also been mean to somebody else. So the work that needs to be done moment to moment as a human being is to check out, why did that hook me? And what do I need to do to attend to that so that I don't go creating more incompletion?
Yeah. It's reminding me of the conversation that I had in my women's recovery group again. We record this on Wednesday afternoons. And I always have my women's recovery meeting 4 hours before you and I get together to record. So often I'm thinking about what happened in that session.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening again now. One of the things that happened in the session today was we looked at overwhelm. And I think there's a relationship between overwhelm and incompletion.
Yes, exactly.
Because overwhelm points to that I have encountered something in my life that requires more of me than I have to respond to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do the best I can, but often the best I can might look a lot like leaving, some sort of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did an exercise today where I just had each of the women in the group describe the last time that they felt overwhelmed. And that didn't mean it didn't have to be extreme. You might feel overwhelmed by your demanding 3-year-old. You might feel overwhelmed by the long line at Costco. And so the question was, first of all, after describing that situation, the next question was, how did you know you were overwhelmed? What did you notice?
Mm-hmm.
What was your thinking? What was going on physically? What was going on with your emotions? What were your impulses? And then what did you actually do to get yourself back within what you could handle?
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting what I heard, just a broad variety of basically survival coping mechanisms that get employed when we get to the point of overwhelm.
Mm-hmm.
And those coping mechanisms help us to get through the moment, but they leave incompletions that stay in our psychic state until they are complete.
You're right.
You're making some notes. What are you writing down?
I'll tell you in a second.
Okay. I think I'm done. I just wanted to mention that's what's going on in my mind as you're.
Yeah. Yeah, no, could you're right. This is why completion is important, because it'll get you into overwhelm otherwise. So I wrote down 3 things. One is on the topic of overwhelm. I can't tell you how many coaching sessions I've conducted in the last 25 years where a client comes to the call and is overwhelmed, and I can feel it. And so we spend that time in the coaching call just enumerating all of the things that are on that client's mind and looking at, okay, what do you need to do to take care of this? And when will you take care of that? And what you need to do to take care of that? And when will you do that? Just like getting it all, mastered in a sense, right? It's not all done yet because we're just talking about it, but now there's a plan, and by the end of the call, 9 times out of 10, the client will say, "Oh wow, I don't know why I feel so much better now. I still have all of this, but I feel so much better," because there's a level of completing the overwhelm itself, right? Not necessarily the jobs.
Right. Even though the tasks themselves haven't been done, they're not complete, but there's a sense of completion because those different concerns were all blended together. And by sorting them out in that way and coming up with a plan that unblended them,
Mhm.
that unblending lends to a greater sense of capacity. Now, I can do each. It's kind of like the alcoholic who stays sober a day at a time. I can stay sober for the next 24 hours.
Mhm.
But I can't stay sober for the next year or the rest of my life.
Right.
That's too much. That's
Right.
overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like a chef who's preparing this for this person and that for that person and this for the dessert and that for the appetite. Like all this is going on. You cannot, if you're doing it all at once, you're not doing any good, really. And so you have to look at each thing and like, okay, here's I can get this to the state I need to be it in, where it can take care of itself, put a lid on it, put it on the back burner on simmer, and then I can pay attention to this dish and work on it. Really, we can only really have our attention on one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
And multitasking is really it's a delusion. You're actually roaming, and at any given point, there's something you're not paying attention to. I mean, even when people juggle, literally, not just juggling all the things that you're overwhelmed by, but literally juggling, you're not actually paying attention to all the objects that you're juggling at once. You've got them in a motion where you can let go of this one, like catch this one, and let go of this one, like that's you're not really paying attention to all those balls at once.
Very good point.
Um,
And attempting to pay attention to all those balls at once is what has you overwhelmed.
You will drop them. Yes, exactly. You will feel overwhelmed and you will drop them. Yeah. The second thing that I wrote down was this reminds me of our last mastermind call and how we've made a new commitment in our group. This is a group of coaches that coach each other. And we've raised the bar on ourselves to say, okay, well, let's coach each other on our coaching as well.
Yes.
So there's
Yes.
other layer now. And so I was asked after being coached what could have been better about the coaching. And I was still in the midst of receiving and being kind of overwhelmed by that. And I just wasn't ready to like reflect on how the coaching that I received could have been better. And so then over the weekend, you all heard from me in emails where I was trying to get complete with that question. I hadn't really answered it to my own satisfaction. It was incomplete for me. And so that got complete through emails with you all over the weekend. So that's just another example.
Great example. Before we move on to number 3, I just want to comment that in a corporation, a business, a company, any kind of an organization where in order for things to work well, there needs to be cooperation between staff, members, team. If there's not a culture that invites completion, then the capacity of the organization itself is going to be soon compromised. So that even when maybe at the beginning of a business or an organization or an endeavor or project, things might be going well because you've got a good plan, everybody's clear and everybody's on the same page. It doesn't take long at all before incompletions begin to stack up, and the negative unintended consequences of those incompletions begin to show up, such as resentments, infighting, triangulation, poor attitudes, lack of motivation, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And like I said, if there's not a process and culture in place for how to complete what's been incomplete by recognizing, hey, there's something going on here. Let's bring it to a safe place and discuss it and get it resolved before we move on, so we can restore our capacity and get back to focus again. Then it's going to be very problematic.
And I mean, one of the sort of positive notes to all of this I want to throw in is that once you get, and I just check this out, Bill, if you don't agree with me, like once you get how good it feels to be complete, you don't like getting stuck. You don't like collecting. It just it becomes intolerable. Like I want to be free. I don't want to be burdened by all these. As soon as stuff comes up, I want to get it complete.
Yes. My story about getting my phone back, my story about finding that my computer was right behind me in the back seat, that relief that I felt there felt so good, and the not knowing felt so bad.
Right. Well, think also about like in your family relations. Like I used to be so uptight around my family, right? Until I got the technology of completion and started getting, like then I had important conversations with my parents and with my brothers. And then from that point on, I was not willing to tolerate just sitting in the same room, sitting on this stuff. And it became much more pleasant, peaceful to be around each other.
And I'm sure that you could probably tell us a story or two about whether it's was in your family or in other circumstances in your life when you recognize that even though the other person maybe wasn't as keen on completion or skilled at it,
Mhm.
it doesn't require more than one person to become complete.
That's right. That's right.
And for me, it's as simple as um, owning my own experience and taking the focus off the other and what might be required of them before I can feel complete.
Hmm. Hmm. That's the key right there. Exactly. And a lot of times, you don't have the opportunity to have the other person, for either they're not as skilled or they're not up for it, or maybe they passed on, or maybe it's a stranger that you'll never see again. So we often do need to find that piece ourselves.
It could be, and finding that might be as simple as recognizing and acknowledging that hanging on to the hurt or the resentment or the meaning making is actually holding us back,
Right.
and we're now hurting ourselves. Byron Katie used to say it all the time when she'd be working with people. I'm sure she still does. I just am talking about her in past tense simply because I don't engage in the Byron Katie method anymore, and I'm not listening to her working with other people on a daily basis like I used to. But when I would hear her say all the time, "How many times did he hit you?" For example,
Hmm.
the thought that was being explored was, "He shouldn't have hit me."
Hmm.
For example,
Hmm.
is it true? Yeah, it's true. He shouldn't have hit me. Can you absolutely know it's true that he shouldn't have hit you? And then Byron Katie's going to introduce the idea that he hit you. That's reality. So how do you know he should have hit you? He did. And of course, that would get people very upset. You're saying that a man should hit a woman or people should hit each other? No, no, no. I'm just saying that when it happens, it should have happened, not because it's justified, but just because it did. It's reality.
Hmm.
So once we get aligned with reality. So then at some point she would say to the person that was doing the work, how many times did he hit you? Once.
Hmm.
And how many times have you hit you? How many times have you replayed this in your mind over, and how many times a day do you replay it in your mind over and over and over again? And for some people, that really, really got their attention. They're
Yeah.
like, I'm the one doing it to myself now. It only happened one time, and I keep running it through my mind over and over and over and over again. And when we really get that we are the ones now that are hurting ourselves, that then
Hmm.
maybe we can let it go and release it.
Daryl Davis calls that a grievance. We create a grievance, and
Oh,
and the grievance is only working against you.
yes. Yes.
His book, by the way, is called Forgive for Good.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well, you've hinted at it, and so I want to ask you. I have a very good worksheet that for completing on your own, right? You can use it to complete with somebody else, but it's for these times when it's you realize, oh, I have a grievance and it's only working against me. I got to get out of this loop. And is there a way that we can pass that on to listeners in the show notes, or
Absolutely. I think maybe the best way to do that, you and I both probably have a toolbox full
right?
of tools that would serve in this direction.
Mhm.
Uh, we'll just have Ari put, as she always does, our contact information in show notes, and people can just contact us and request that directly. Um,
Great.
and I hear from you, and I'll say it too, that I'm more than happy to provide whatever tools that I have. And then, of course, if people need additional help, that's what we're in the business of doing.
It's also in both of my books. This exercise, this worksheet. It's in both Listen Till You Disappear and in Leadership as Relation and under completion exercise. So it's easy to
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I need to begin to wrap up here, Marty. I've got in session with my men's recovery group here shortly. So, um, in what way would we like to complete this part two of completion?
one good way to is to acknowledge. So I want to acknowledge you for the presence of mind that you had to take care of, because you weren't getting help, to take care of getting your phone yourself and let that guy go. So,
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I want to thank my rebellious teenager part for doing that for me.
yes.
I also want to acknowledge you, Marty, in the example that you gave of recognizing by Saturday that you weren't complete with the kind of feedback that you wanted to give and exchange with our coaching group for Friday morning. And along those lines, I think I may have said this in the email to you, but I read your email and was activated actually by it. There were several of my parts that were activated just reading your email because they were making things mean things. And this is interesting. I actually put AI to work, and I took your email and I dropped it into AI and I said, tell me what this means. What is he saying here? Seriously. And AI just sorted it all out for me. Well, he's saying this, he's not quite resolved here, and he wants this, and he's making this request. And thank you. Great. Awesome. And from that, I was able then to respond to you in the way that I did in that email.
I see.
So thanks for bringing it, and thanks AI for helping me sort it out. Let me ask you now: do you feel complete about that from Friday, or is there anything, by the way, that I've just now said that creates a new income?
No, I am complete.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Another great conversation. I'm sure that we probably will talk about completion again at some point in the future, even if we don't directly acknowledge that that's what we're talking about. Because I really think that most of the coaching that you and I do involves this conversation, this topic, practically every single session. What's getting in your way? Something that's incomplete. Once it's complete, I'm open now to whatever might next come.
Exactly.
All right. Until next week.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Coaching, where we help you learn to lead with confidence and compassion.
If you enjoyed listening, please share it. Don't miss a single episode. To subscribe and to get show notes, visit leadershipcoachingpodcast.com.